All right. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Doug Cluck. I ex-NOAA person. We're here today to do the North Central U.S. climate and drought outlook and summary, I should say. Our speaker today is Dr. Dennis Todey, who's ex-South Dakota State Climatologist and now works for the USDA out of Ames, Iowa. He'll be giving the talk like he has for in April for the last, I don't know how many years, several years, but April is his month. Couple things. We tend to, we ask that if you have questions, you put them in the Q&A portion of the interface down at the bottom. If you want to put it in chat, we can probably live with that as well. So you can do it either way. Our speaker will take about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll go into that Q&A session. Something a little bit different that we're going to do today because conditions have been so strange, especially in the West. Well, basically from here west, I'm in Kansas City, is talk a little bit about, before Dennis gets going here, a little bit nationally about some of the takeaways that happened across the U.S. in March. And things were so outstanding from a climatological point of view that we feel that we need to point these out. And then we'll get more regional with Dennis in just a minute. And thanks to the National Centers for Environmental Information for providing this key information. Also, I do want to thank the National Drought Mitigation Center for hosting us today as well. So some key takeaways from March. I don't know if you know or remember March very well, but gosh, it was warm. In fact, the contiguous U.S. average temperature was about 9 degrees, a little bit above that, above the 20th century average, making March the warmest March in the 132-year record. That's for the country, the 48 states. April of 2025, so last year, through March of this year, was the warmest 12-month span ever recorded in the same 48 states since 1895 anyway. Record daily heat, 1,432 counties, over half of the U.S., lower 48, and 1/3 of the population observed their single warmest March day on record. And that goes back to 1950. It's never been warmer in 1,432 counties in the U.S. A couple other things, record dry. It's been record dry from January to March this year. It's the driest 3-month period, January through March period of that it's been dry, never been drier. Let's put it that way. And then notable drought footprint, dry conditions expanded drought to nearly 60% of the U.S. And I have to add this. It was the fourth coldest March on record in Alaska. Now, Dennis is going to take it away at this point and get a little more local, regional. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, thanks for that national overview. We do have a lot to talk about and a lot of context to put on and some more local detail to add to what Doug talked about. So yeah, April has been my month, and I'm thinking back, we've been doing these for 14 years now. So still happy that people are finding them useful and having that opportunity to talk with local partners and to present to you kind of a summarized situation, trying to boil this all down and give you a snapshot of what's happening regionally. Again, all of our partners that we're having involved here. And our next webinar is May 21st, next month. Eric Hunt, the Extension Climatologist in the State Climate Office, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, will be the presenter. I thought he had done it, but it's the first time for him doing that. So we'll also talk about, we've had to adjust what we're doing with our slides and our recordings. We still have them housed at regional climate centers, but we've had to adjust what we're doing overall. So usual rundown of current conditions, some impact issues, and then touch on where we are with the outlooks. The big story right now is what's going on with El Nino. Some of you may have seen the super El Nino mentioned. Let's note that is not a climatological term. We do talk about strong El Ninos, and we'll put this in context for what may be happening and how that would influence us overall. So a quick review of current conditions and on where we are. Again, what Doug talked about, here's a state by state view of where we are in March for the month of March. Again, everywhere in the country was much warmer than average overall. The northern tier was the least warmer than average. And then you get out, especially into the Southwest and our states, our mountain states that came in as the warmest overall on record here. To break that down by county to give you that idea of where we are for the month of March, most of Wyoming through Colorado, western Nebraska, western Kansas counties were the warmest March overall, while everybody else again was warmer, except for counties right along the Canadian border where they did have some snow, and that kept things somewhat cooler in that area. March precipitation, and we're gonna see a lot of times here where we're talking about a tale of two stories, looking across our region. Wetter than average conditions, much wetter than average conditions in March in the eastern Corn Belt, Michigan down to Indiana, Ohio. Near top 10, Michigan would be the third wettest March on record. We'll give you more detail here. Whereas you get out into the plains area, Nebraska the fifth driest, and Colorado the second driest overall. And then Montana coming in kind of odd at wetter, different from where we are in the rest of the plains overall. But then again, we'll zoom up on the county level, and it gives you some really interesting details about where we are overall. Again, the darker the green, if you're colorblind, I do apologize. But basically, most of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio on the wetter side, one county in southeastern Michigan here, and maybe a second county up further north coming in at their wettest on record along with that. Whereas you look in contrast out in Nebraska, southwestern Nebraska, western Kansas, and southeastern, and the western slope of Colorado, driest Marches on record overall. So again, a real contrast of what we're seeing across the region. Go back to Doug talked about the last 3 months, 3 full months, January through March, and you see much of the same. Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado all come in as the warmest on record, with others, western states in the top 10. Iowa coming in at 122, just outside the top 10. And then somewhat less warm, but still warmer than average as you go over to the eastern part of our region. Going up to the county look again, shows much of that same detail. Counties, January through March, much, warmest on record from Colorado down to Kansas, that same area. While if we go over to Ohio, eastern Ohio being closer to average, they were probably still were slightly above average overall, but we consider them near average in this ranking. And then the January through March precipitation again keeps that tale of two cities, but it is modified a little bit. Michigan and Wisconsin come in as wet, but the Eastern Corn Belt overall was quite dry, or was near average, whereas Kentucky was the fourth driest, and we're going to revisit Kentucky a couple times as we go along here, and many of these western states. South Dakota, Nebraska second, Wyoming third, Colorado fourth overall for driest January through March on record. And then the county level again, a number of counties from Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, South Dakota, and even one in southwest Minnesota coming in as the driest on record. And then also part of a couple counties in Kentucky and a couple counties in Missouri coming in as their driest on record. So you can see where we had precipitation and definitely did not have precipitation across our region. Okay, trying to keep things moving along here. Last 30 days, total precipitation on the left, percent of normal on the right, and we're still keeping that same kind of pattern with that area from northwestern Missouri, northern Missouri through Iowa up into the Great Lakes. but kind of missing out on the Ohio River Valley as them being drier than average, dropping a lot of precipitation. Northern areas, North Dakota, Minnesota, getting some heavier snows and precipitation here, while that core area in the Central Plains remains very dry, very dangerously dry. We'll continue to revisit that as we go along here. And then temperature the last 30 days follows that very similar pattern, generally warmer than average to the south and west, while as we go up to the north, we are closer to average, though slightly above average overall. We did throw a couple more details in as we look back to March. Several states did set all-time March individual temperature records. South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri all set individual warmest high temperature for an individual day records through those states. We probably had a few others in other states too. Those were the ones that just came up yesterday during the conversation. And then we could go on to numerous daily record highs, earliest 85, earliest 90, earliest 95 as we go throughout all of our region. We'd get into a menagerie of different ways of looking at that. Just it's been very warm very early in a number of these situations. The dryness has helped contribute to this, but getting us much warmer than average. And then one more detail about the wetness on a closer time scale. This is from the Southeast Regional Climate Center, their climate perspectives tool. You can pick out stations and periods of time, and it gives you a ranking for them. So the darker colors, all of these stations had their wettest period from March 1 to April 14. So kind of giving you perspective, March was wet. That pattern continues as we've gone along, and we'll talk more about that as we go along here. Now, getting away from temperature and precipitation, over the few days coming into this, we talk with regional partners and say, what's going on? What kind of comments, what kinds of things are you hearing? Several comments on windy conditions came up. And, we do have to remind people that spring is, in the North Central U.S., is our windiest part of the year. And unfortunately, we don't have good averages, good climatologies of wind to be able to refer to say how windy is it. The National Center for Environmental Information does have a regional or a national graphic, but it's only updated through February, so we couldn't use that. So we went to one of our partners at Iowa State, the Iowa Environmental Mesonet, and picked out one station, Indianapolis. And what this shows is the green is the daily average, and this is for the month of April, days 1 on the left, day 14 on the right. So the top of the green bar is the average wind speed for that day, not direction, just average wind speed for that day. And then that compares to the black line across there. So you can see only a couple days in this 14-day period were we below the average, and several days were well above the average. And then the top of the red bar was the peak wind gust during the day. So that's kind of a standout that they had over 60 mile per hour winds one day, but lots of 30s and 40s, which is pretty good for Indianapolis. So it does appear that especially, or most of the region has been windier than average in a windy time of year. We've also still been reminded that spring is a time where we can get snow. North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and I think parts of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan still did have some heavy snows. This is from our colleagues in Minnesota that we got a 1-2 punch of big snows the first 4 days of April, where they had heavy snow, strong winds. Here's the link here. You can find out more about it. But the colors here are over 30 and as much as over 30 to 36 inches of snowfall between those two, and then widespread over 8 to 10 inches between those two snows. So some late reminders and return to winter that occurred up in that area. Spring is also, this is the other reason why I enjoy doing April, because there's so many different things going on. Late winter, severe weather going on. This is just from the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center. On the left-hand side is all the storm reports for the month of March. So you can see a lot of storm reports, which we would expect this time of year from, the Southern Plains over to the Northeast, a lot in that area. And then so far in April, you see quite a bit fewer. And until the last several days, it had really been very quiet from a severe weather standpoint. So from Texas up to, the last few days up in Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, we've had a lot going on, and there is another round of that coming up for those of you that are watching this in real time on Friday coming up. So there has been less activity for the month of April. We still have time for that going on. You'll note over the southeastern U.S. a lack of this because there's been relatively dry and not a lot of precipitation going on in that area. Okay, we've gone from talking to precipitation. Let's go to talk about lack of precipitation and drought. As one would expect, based on the precipitation I've shown you, well, here's a national view of where we are in the way of drought, that much of the central and eastern part of our region is relatively drought-free because of the recent precipitation, has greatly improved drought conditions. We'll show that here in a little bit. Whereas the southeastern U.S. and western U.S. have quite a bit of drought conditions going on. Let's see, point out some numbers here compared to where we were at this point last year. Nationally, we have quite a bit more drought than we did at this time last year. When we look at these, the current line is on the top at the various categories, and here's the 1 year ago at the bottom. If we zoom up over our region that we work with, and that's mainly from the Front Range of the Rockies out into Michigan and Ohio, you see that again blown up. We're not a whole lot of drought in the eastern part of our region, still quite a bit in the plains and on into the drought. From a comparison standpoint to last year, we are relatively close to where we were in the amount of coverage. D1 to D4 this year is a little over 44%. Last year it was about 38.5%. So a bit more drought overall. And then we have much more of a D3, D4 than we did at this time last year. And then, no surprise, the change we've had over the last 2 weeks that has occurred because of this, that area from Missouri, Iowa eastward, we've seen quite a bit of improvement. Whereas Kentucky and not our area, the southeastern U.S. and the plains and Front Range of the Rockies has seen quite a bit of worsening on the drought condition standpoint.
And that's the last 2 months, not last 2 weeks, by the way.
Thank you. I saw the weeks, 8 weeks, correct, to be the last 2 months. Thanks for interjecting, Doug. Okay, we'll go back to water a little bit more again to talk a bit more on some details about some of the issues going on. A picture here from Michigan, where the recent rainfalls and snow, we're going to touch on that here too, has led to an awful lot of water on the landscape that is trying to be moved off. There's been a couple dam failures, some roads washed out, some bridges washed out because of the extreme rainfalls. Now, I'm going to walk you through this. We're using this graphic. It's a similar graphic to what we've used previously with stream flows, but the USGS has changed how they are doing this, and their 7-day and 30-day stream flow graphics don't exist anymore. So I'm going to walk you through this because you can't see very well the background map related to this. So the color scale is the same as we've seen previously. Anything in the browns and reds is below average to much below average to driest on record. So where we are in the Ohio Valley down here and then to the southeast, very dry conditions because of recent dryness and some longer term dryness. And that's one of the things I was going to mention too, is one of the issues we're settling on is we're going to see how stream flows do with some of the recent rainfall. Because we've had drought conditions ongoing periodically for the last several years, we have some concerns about deeper groundwater and deeper soil moisture profiles that may not have recovered as well as we'd like them to. So we're going to see how quickly we have a drop off in these stream flow conditions. So again, Ohio Valley and kind of to the east, much below average stream conditions. Some greens are near average, and then when you get up into Michigan and Wisconsin, we have well above average to record for this day stream flows. And then the open circles with pink around them are in flood conditions right now because of the recent rains. And I'll show you snow. We've had snow up in that area too. It's been melting off, even existing into eastern Iowa. Then as we arc up into Minnesota and the northern plains, generally mid-range wetness conditions around the Black Hills, and then central to southern plains, generally drier than or below average stream flows. And then as you get out into the Rockies, you see kind of a mishmash with some drier, but some in this blue and red or blue and black, which are above average. You might say, well, okay, what's going on there? Well, the big issue we have is that, and we're going to talk more about this here in just a second, we have melt off, early melt off of what limited water we have, what limited snow we have up there. So we're getting an early melt off. So stream flows are coming up much earlier than they should have previously, which is okay for now, but it bodes poorly for what's coming up as that snow melts off and doesn't hang on later on. Okay, touch on soil moisture here, a little bit of background related to this. The graphic on the left-hand side is a NASA product. The upper right-hand side is a NOAA product. These are percentiles. So the places we would expect, Central Plains, and then in the Eastern Corn Belt, Ohio Valley, generally drier than average soil conditions. Even though we've had some rainfalls over there, we've cut into the soil moisture deficits, but still had some problems. And then that Michigan, Wisconsin, northern Iowa, coming in above average, and then you'll see an above average area in parts of North Dakota and South Dakota. Laura Edwards did report from the National Weather Service that this is not an anomaly. It is really wetter than average in that area. And then the USDA NASS topsoil moisture reports, as we would expect, that Wisconsin over to Ohio area, the percent short to very short is very small. Whereas when you go out into the plains and then the front range states, the short to very short topsoil moisture is very high in those areas because of the lack of rainfall and the heat. Now, just a quick point out to where we are. We still in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They had a very good snow year. This is the SWE, the snow water equivalent that is still, according to this no risk product, is still saying that we are over 10 inches of liquid on the ground. Question whether that's really truly the case or not, but we still have in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan snow and water that has to be melted off. You can see, areas to the south we've melted off, and it's all into stream flow at this point and recent rains. Now we're going to work our way further west where we have a completely different situation. You may have heard in the media about the lack of snowfall in the U.S. western states, and we cannot understate how serious a situation this is. And let's walk you through this here. This is a regular product that we show from the USDA NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, that report snowpack in the region. And you see lots of red throughout the whole western U.S. And that is because most of the snow, the snow courses in the area, stream basins, are less than 50% of snow water equivalent, how much water we would expect at this time of year. And you see some of the places further west are in the teens or single digits, which is really truly concerning for what our situation is. The states we deal with, or the basins we deal with on the Missouri River up here in Montana, northern Wyoming, aren't great, but they're better than everybody else is. And then the Platte River, we're going to show you here in just a second where we are in those situations. Are in the Plattes are in the 20 to 30%, whereas the ones going into the Missouri are not good, but they are better than what we've seen overall. So to look at those in detail, these are graphics from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers where we are in Missouri River Basin snowpack. This is above Fort Peck and Fort Peck to Garrison, so this is what goes into the upper Missouri Basin. Now, the graphics here, the red is the average for both of these. And then the blue line at the top is the 2011 year, which was an extreme year. And then the green is the minimum down here, the worst. So you can see where we were is we weren't doing too badly overall. We were close to average in January and February, but then things tailed off. And then we reached our peak in mid-March, the peak of this blue shaded area. Note that is about a month or a little bit more than a month earlier than the average peak. The average usually is around the middle of April. So we reached our peak and we started melting off earlier. And this was very common throughout all the western U.S. Of what snow we did have was starting to disappear more quickly. Here's the North Platte and the South Platte, and you can see an even more dire situation in these locations. Again, those peaks did occur in mid-March, but they were even lower and were tailing off very quickly in both of these cases. So while we're getting stream flow now, we're probably not going to see a lot of that stream flow as we go along into the year. Our Colorado folks have noted that water conservation measures are being installed already in parts of Colorado because of the concern they have going on overall. Now, while we've also talked about how much or lack of precipitation we've had, the other part we have to put on that has played a huge role in this is the evaporative demand. What the condition of the atmosphere is and how much it's evaporating from the surface. We're using a product called Eddy. The evaporative demand, I can't remember what the acronym is overall. This is a NOAA product. And the colors on this are related to drought monitor categories. So the darker the categories would be equivalent to whatever the drought categories would be. So you see this area from Ohio through the southern part of our region because of the very warm conditions ongoing. And that's really been driving a lot of evaporation from the surface. So even even though places where we've had some rainfall, we're evaporating a lot of water from the surface. So yes, check the chat. We've got a link to that, and Andrew's thing of giving a shout out to some of the developers, and we should do that to everyone. That we steal and borrow a lot of partners' products in this to put this together to really, and they really help us to talk about what we're doing on. Okay. Quick wrap up of some water issues here. The lead-in, as you might imagine, the Missouri River flows. There is enough stored water in the reservoir system to be able to maintain some level of navigation service. The Army Corps of Engineers has dropped their estimate of runoff this year because of the big tailing off in precipitation over the last month. So that will have to be monitored through the year. In the past few years, we've been concerned about the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is okay at this point. Some of those rainfalls especially in Wisconsin, are going into the Mississippi River. So while we're seeing some flooding up in in the Wisconsin area and parts of Michigan, probably won't be a problem as it gets down the Mississippi, and that will help to maintain the Mississippi for a while. We'll continue to need rains as we go along. Again, we have flooding around the Great Lakes because of some of the heavy snowmelt and then recent rains. I mentioned watering restrictions going on in the Front Range of Colorado and seeing reports of some of this in Kentucky because of dryness there. And then Colorado, folks from Colorado reported this is the worst snow year on record. Okay, another thing we talk about in the spring is fire. Fire is there. We're getting reports of fire from around the area. Things have calmed down a bit, even though conditions are still very conducive. We've been lucky so far. Laura Edwards reported from South Dakota that the Black Hills had several fire starts, fairly large fires overall. They were able to maintain, but that's fairly early for the Black Hills. Conditions we've talked about in Nebraska previously, they've eased. But here's a graphic from our presenter next month, Eric Hunt, talking about the acres burned from 2008 till the present. You can see a couple of years that stand out, 2012, and then this year in 2026, nearly 1 million acres burned already. Things have quieted down. This is through March 30th. Things have quieted down, but we did see serious problems there. Some in Western Kentucky, even parts in Minnesota too, where they did report some fires overall. Okay, let's go to ag conditions, my favorite part since I work for USDA. One of the things that has thrown things off so far this year, again with the warmth, has been moving along perennials. This is two graphics from the National Phenological Network on their first leaf timing, where we are with their first leaf showing up, and then first bloom on the lower right hand side. You can go to their graphic and see how they define that. But then the colors on here show you how far ahead or behind they are. The first leaf was actually slowed a bit from Texas down into the East Coast, but throughout much of the Midwest and especially out in the plains, we were on the order of 3 weeks ahead of time. Early dormancy break, so first leaf in this situation. And then the first bloom is very similar for a lot of the region. Some of the eastern parts vary, maybe not quite as bad, What that does is it sets us up for freeze potential if we do have, and there is freeze potential coming up this weekend if you're listening to us live. That is not that late a freeze, but because we have plants that are well ahead in their phenology, they are at risk of some damage because of freeze. Okay, some other things, just a quick look at soil temperatures. Generally around the region, soil temperatures are conducive for most people to be planting, and some places they are, especially further south. We'll show you that here in just a second. While in contrast, up in North Dakota, we still have some soils right at freezing, so they're still a little behind in what we're doing there. So to kind of touch on a few things where we are from an ag perspective, winter wheat, the percent good to excellent is on the left-hand side, and the winter wheat progress is on the right-hand side. Note that these are available at a National Drought Mitigation Center website called Ag and Drought. You can see that on the left-hand side. So again, a tale of two stories for winter wheat conditions. From basically the Mississippi River east, generally good to excellent conditions overall because of the wetter conditions. While in the plains, good to excellent is really pretty small. And local reports do bear this out that winter wheat has been taking a beating. Now, if we can't get precipitation, we can change the tune on this a bit, but we are getting late into this. From a progress standpoint, winter wheat headed is being a little slow still, but still ahead of the 5-year average in most of our states, more so further south where we've been able to make that progress. And then just a bunch of other smaller crops on where we are: sorghum in the upper left-hand side, spring wheat and barley in the upper right on the right-hand side, planted in the same areas. We have some progress: 15% spring wheat planted in South Dakota. Oats with a fair amount more progress it's planted in a number of different areas. And then we'll go on to corn and soybeans. Corn on the left-hand side and soybeans on the right-hand side. 5% of the corn is planted nationally, 6% planted on the soybeans, most of those in the south and eastern parts where soils are drier and people have been able to make progress. Further north, temperatures would be conducive and there probably would have been more activity, but we've gotten rainy over the last week and that's slowed activity down. Also, just another interesting thing on the right-hand side, soybeans are ahead of corn, as has been a push recently. We're not sure exactly why, but there has been more of a push to get soybeans in earlier. So, mentioned planting progress started ahead of average Southern Corn Belt. One of our partners down in Southern Indiana said they're mostly planted in that area already. The wet conditions, as I mentioned, slowed things further north. Dryness in the plains is impacting winter wheat, as we showed, and we don't have the rangeland graphic yet, but partners are pointing out the rangeland has taken a real beating out there so far. Now, we are at a time of the year where we really need to have precipitation, and if we can get some precipitation, we can get rangeland to bounce back and the winter wheat to bounce back, but that needs to be happening very soon for those to recover very well. Mentioned from Missouri, so we have some early irrigation going on. Mentioned calving in the plains has generally been easier because of the dry conditions, and I think in Kentucky too, the lack of mud was a benefit for them. Back in late March, we did have a freeze where we did have some perennials that were advanced enough to cause some damage. Turned out it was not as bad as we expected, but from Iowa to Ohio, mainly tree fruits and grapes did this. Reports out of Illinois where strawberries managed their way through, peaches generally managed their way through. We thought we'd lose a lot more out of there. So some damage, but it was not as bad. Again, now we're further along and we still are close to some freezing temperatures. Look at your local weather service forecast for this coming weekend to see what kind of details you're in and take it and take action if you can. And then also low farm ponds in mentioned out west. And then down in the Kentucky, probably Missouri area, some of that long-term dryness that's leading to lack of surface water for people who have livestock on their land. Okay, moving along here to get us to the outlooks. and a picture from about 100 yards from my house of a lightning damaged tree that occurred last week. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, the big driver or big topic that's driving what's going on the way, Alex, is what's going on with El Nino. Now, we usually don't talk about this. Doug gave me permission to geek out a little bit. Two animations going on here. Left-hand side is sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. Australia, New Guinea on the left-hand side, South America, Peru on the right-hand side, and here's Mexico. You can see some blue areas showing slightly cooler than average temperatures. That's the remnants of the La Nina. We are officially out of La Nina right now into neutral conditions. And that might fool you a little bit because if you look on the lower right-hand side, we have a temperature map. This would be like you're down in Antarctica looking up through the ocean at the sea surface temperatures at depth. Or so what's going on? Basically, just below the surface. Whoops, let's go back here. You see some very brown here, very, very warm ocean temperatures that are working their way across the Pacific and then are going to start showing up at the surface very quickly. That is why we're expecting a quick transition out of, we were in La Nina, we're going to be in neutral, and within the next month or two, probably going to El Nino conditions. And that's what this graphic plays out for us here, again, from the Climate Prediction Center. The letters on the bottom indicate the 3-month periods. AMJ is April, May, June. MJJ is May, June, July, all the way to November, December, January. And the bars there indicate probabilities of being in red, which is El Nino, being in neutral, which is gray, and you see no La Nina after March, April, May. And so the one to point out here is MJJ. So May, June, July, the 3-month time period, sometime during that time period, we officially are likely going to be in El Nino. Now, what does El Nino do for us? El Nino during the summertime there's not really strong signals, but there are hints of some things during summertime, and there are some things we can talk about in the outlooks because we know El Nino is going to be there, especially as we go into the late fall and winter. Very high probability that we're in El Nino territory, so that is likely going to affect our winter. We tend to have warmer winters in the upper Midwest with El Ninos. And then the other part I mentioned about earlier, the strength of that, here is a graphic also from the Climate Prediction Center pointing out that same thing, but what are the probabilities of being into the different categories? And you can see on the right-hand side, in October, November, December, January, we're at about a 25% chance of falling in that category of very strong El Ninos. And so that is just an indication that we're very likely going to go into El Nino. Just because we fall into a very strong El Nino does not guarantee exactly what's going to happen, but that it does improve the odds of that happening. So we're going to continue to watch that as we go along here. All right, moving us along here. Next 7-day model precipitation forecast. Heavier rains are easing a bit. Kansas, Missouri still expecting some 1-inch plus amounts likely in the eastern Corn Belt. The plains, unfortunately, missing out on some of the rainfalls that they're needing to get overall. Jumping ahead now to the 8 to 14-day time period. Temperatures on the left-hand side, precipitation on the right-hand side, and that's going to be for the next several graphics here. So near normal temperatures, the warmer than average is going to ease a little bit, but by late April, we're generally getting warmer throughout the region. The wetter than average does stick with us and does move out in the plains, which is some good news for us. And we hope that this does pan out. So it does show the chances of that happening. The 8 to 14-day hazards, you'll see the southern Mississippi Valley has chances for heavy precipitation in that time area. And also this hatched area up here has flooding ongoing or flooding possibility because of the water on the landscape and still chances for precipitation. And then a couple other things to point out, that larger area, a slight risk of heavier rainfalls exists throughout much of the eastern part of our area. Much of the plains is in a slight risk of high winds. From the dry areas, that's not good. Also a problem from a fire standpoint. And then our western areas, we do have a slight risk of heavy snow, which people would be happy to have because of the additional water at this time of the year. Okay, now we jump to 30 days. A lot of things in play here. We're getting out of La Nina, so some of the predictability starts to go away. Generally, the thinking is the warmth stays to the west, whereas much of the eastern part of our region has equal chances. We don't have strong indications one way or the other. And then from a precipitation standpoint, without that El Nino, La Nina influence, lots of things open and not a lot of indications on that one way or the other. Then the 90-day temperature and precipitation outlook, May, June, July, again, likely warm to the west and to the southeast where we're quite dry, whereas the northern part of our region around the Great Lakes, less chance, or really not a strong chance of being warmer than average, again, equal chances. And then again, a lot of white, maybe some hints towards below precipitation in the Central Plains, but a lot of not strong indications, and then maybe some early start to monsoonal moisture down to our south. And then I say summer, this is July, August, September. I specifically pulled this one out because it adds on to the previous outlook. And then we do have, because of the El Nino, a slight hint towards cooler than average conditions, centered on Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, or excuse me, Missouri, get my states right here, while as areas to the west have a tilt towards the warm side. And this is kind of indicative of what we would expect during El Nino summers. El Nino summers maybe are not cool, but they tend not to be hot. And then El Nino summers throughout much of the region tend not to be dry. Now, there is a hint towards dryness here in the July, August, September outlook, and that is as a balance to expected monsoonal moisture farther to the west. So we'll see how this plays out overall. But much of the region doesn't have a whole lot of indications in the way of precipitation overall. So what that puts us from a drought outlook, the drought outlook is always a tough one to call at this time of year because so much can happen during the summertime. But the thinking right now is continued improvement to the east, and then that area to the west with the dryness and not having good indications on precipitation probably sticks with us in some form. And then the May wildfire outlook right now does not have a whole lot to say for us. And I forgot to put in any additional ones overall. We'll check those and put that in quickly here also. Okay, kind of summarize where we are. Drought conditions continue in the west and are developing in our southeast area. Kentucky, while the eastern part of our region has been clear. Again, a big snow drought issue to our west. We've seen that improvement to the east. Overall, very warm spring. Any way you slice and dice it, record warm to very warm, which has caused a number of different issues that we're going to have to continue to deal with. Early field work is beginning and continuation of some fires, though not as bad as they were earlier. So looking ahead, El Nino looking very likely, potentially getting all the way up to strong category by later in the year. We'll see how that plays out. So that has influenced the outlooks by late summer into the fall and winter. The near term does continue to look more active and wetter overall, which for some of us, that's a good thing. Some of us, we need to have some dryness for planting to go on to ease some flooding. Drier, warmer conditions are more possible in the west, spring and summer. And then there's that hint towards the more moderate to maybe cooler in the eastern part of the region as the summer goes along. We do have some feed from a rangeland standpoint and water concerns from a livestock standpoint and overall water, especially in the western region because of the lack of snow and runoff that we'll have. So that brings us to the end. Thank yous to all the people who have contributed to this, whether they knew it or not. Lots of our partners contribute different pieces of information. We love having them overall. And here's some of our close partners you can ask for more information. And that wraps it up. So where are we, Doug?
We are, go back a slide so people can see who the heck we are. Okay. Yeah, and you can put my phone number in there next month if you want to, but it's on the bottom of all my emails. So if you get my email, you will see what that is. Thank you, Dennis, for that fast and furious presentation. We should have you drive a car sometime.
That's not the way I drive a car.
Oh, okay. I thought this is about the same speed. I wanted to point out the fire danger thing over the next few months. Yeah, I'm going to show a slide here. Whoops, I don't know if I did it right. Okay, I want to show this one, yeah, which is just Dennis, and we'll show you. Can you see it? The
Yes.
significant.
Yep.
Okay, so Dennis showed, I believe he showed May. It's a little more exciting to look at April. We already know this, and if you look at the weather.gov page, you'll see that there's a huge area of pink or hot pink color, which is our fire danger day on a daily basis. But this is for the rest of April, showing that high plains area all the way down to Texas being more likely than normal for significant wildland fire. Now, if we advance this past May into June, we see what's happening in Colorado and places west. And if we go one more month into the future, July, we see Colorado still stays sort of under the gun as well as much of the west. So this is above normal, what they're considering above normal fire potential for those areas. So that's just something I wanted to point out to you all. And then, Dennis, did you mention the potential freeze? Yeah, you did, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Check your
Okay.
local weather service office for forecast this weekend.
Yeah.
Um, because of that early progress in growing season, most things planted are probably okay. Perennials are the ones that are real at risk. So,
Yeah. And I think we probably would be missing something if we didn't mention the fact that a whole bunch of our region, like it's really ours, a whole bunch of the region is covered with slight to sort of enhanced chances of severe weather tomorrow. So all I'm saying is pay attention. It's a pretty big swath. You can see that if you go to I'll show it to you.
and Doug, while you bring that up, I'm going to riff
Yeah,
on your El Nino La Nina comment too.
go, man.
Um, we gave you some broader ideas on what El Nino La Nina could mean this summertime. When we talk about how El Nino and La Nina influence us, there's more influence throughout the U.S. generally in the cold season than there is in the warm season. There are hints of things in the warm season. So it does play a little bit of a role, but there are a lot of other more local or other shorter term things that we can't predict that can influence besides El Nino and La Nina. So that's Doug, depending on your location and depending on timing, there's a lot of things that can happen. There are some general things that we can say, but not with a great detail overall.
Yeah, and in the best case scenario, overall, let's say in the middle of the winter, probably El Nino, La Nina, whatever, adds about 20 to anywhere from 15 to 25% of your forecastability. So, and I'm talking at the climate scale. So we're talking months. So above or below temperature, above or below precipitation. It's a very useful tool for those who predict things, and we weigh heavily on that. So anyway, this is tomorrow. Any place in the orange, you're under the gun. You're under the gun, and so beware. And I know we're supposed to be talking about climate, not severe weather, but I figured, it's going to happen. So heads up. Okay. In terms of, I don't have anything in the Q&A. There are some comments.
Brian mentioned about crop insurance considerations. Yes,
Yeah.
there are required planting dates that are listed by USDA RMA that you should follow. There are things you can do with your insurance to change when you can plant that I don't follow those closely. So, I think at this point, especially in the central and southern part of the region, we're probably okay because we're past those dates already. And in many cases, the limitation now is when can I get in the field? Please make good choices in the field. in the way of waiting until it's dry enough overall. Further north, you know, depending on where you are, the plains, will probably be able to get out. Wisconsin, Michigan is going to be wet for a bit here overall.
One other thing I did want to mention, that anybody wants the PDF, we're having a little trouble getting them up on the web because of accessibility issues, but we'll still continue to put the webinars up there. That's not the problem, the recorded version. But the PDF of the presentation, please just write me or Dennis and say, hey, can I have a copy? And we'll send it to you. Just send us an email requesting it if you want it. It's not a problem. I think that's it. We actually might finish before 2 o'clock unless you have anything else you want to cover, Dennis.
No, Chip put a comment in there about, you know, Western Kentucky, and the dryness that is existing down there. But yeah, think we've covered all the things, all the comments we've had in there. Any questions? So
well, yeah, sure. I'll make one question about what Chip put in there, or one comment. So when he says normal is 21 inches, that I'm not quibbling with any of those numbers, but I am quibbling with the fact that this was a La Nina year, and the Ohio Basin generally, as far as we know, as far as correlations go, tends to be wetter. So we're seeing the opposite. What does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything in particular, other than the weather didn't follow what La Nina we thought La Nina normally did in the Ohio Basin. Hopefully that makes sense to you. That's the hard part about predictability, right? And so Super El Nino, everybody's excited about it, means so much. Well, we'll see. Let's get closer to the actual time before we put too many eggs in any particular basket.
nice ag reference, Doug.
There you go.
And to his comment, there was, you know, if you go back to the graphics we showed, there was rainess in the Ohio Valley. It just wasn't it was a different part of the Ohio Valley. It was further north, slightly shifted further north towards the Great Lakes. So we did get it. It just wasn't where we thought we were going to get it. And if you look back at other La Ninas, that can happen. Somewhere in that area it gets wet, but it's not always exactly where you would expect it to be.
And we're having crazy amounts of flooding up even further north than Great Lakes.
Yes.
And that is a typical La Nina-esque area to get above normal precipitation, even this late in the spring. So, all right. Hey, thank you very much. Again, we'll welcome Eric Hunt next month to do the presentation. Hope he listened and learned something. Just kidding, Eric. And we'll see you all. So thank you very much.